All right. I've had Dr. Jamil before. You guys, if you saw him before, you know he's a coach and very powerful coach, mindset coach as that, which yeah, at that, real estate investors, realtors, other business stuff, athletes, everything, everything under the sun. But, we got recently talking to each other and we had this amazing time conversation that I had to turn it into a podcast. So I said, hey, let's put this out there. So with that being said, Dr. Jamil, kind of give a little bit of intro for people who might not know who you are, or haven't seen the previous video, kind of give a brief intro, I guess.
For sure. First of all, Raju, again, thank you so much for having me. I always love your energy, and there's so much passion and presence that you bring. And there's a level of, it's almost like the word that's coming up is a giddiness, which I love. There's like this, I'm excited to be here, and I think that we can all benefit from more of that in our life. So you model that beautifully. So thank you for that. And for anyone who I haven't had the privilege yet of connecting with and meeting, short version, essentially, I'm a lover of people. I'm somebody who loves to see people thriving in their element, loving their life, loving themselves. And what I think about is like, how can I support you in waking up and remembering who you really are? Very often I think we all wear the mask, or most of the time, most of us wear the mask, let's say, to be more accurate. And that mask is, who do I need to be loved and accepted and validated and, normal, all these different things. But the mask isn't who we really are. And we kind of forget that over time, but we know something's not right. We know that maybe I'm not as happy and fulfilled as I would like to be, or maybe I feel like I can't really be the real me, because if I do that, maybe the people around me won't fully accept me. And that mask is blocking, everything that you want from the other side of that. And so when I think about the work that I do for the last almost 20 years now, it's been all about, how can I help people understand, here's where you're at right now, here's where you want to be, but what's the gap? What's blocking you? What's in the way? And how can I help you see yourself and your world in a completely different light? There's an expression, a few different expressions. We don't see the world the way that it is. We see it the way we are. And then when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so when I think about the work I do with people, sometimes people say, what do you do? And I don't just say, I'm a coach, because I'm so much more than that, but also that doesn't, no one knows what the hell that even means. When I first said that, someone was like, oh, Little League? And I was like, no. So it's like, what do you do? And at the end of the day, what I truly believe is, like, I help people create miracles in their life. And someone goes, what do you mean? It's like, well, imagine what your life you would dream of, your finances, your relationship, your goals. Like, what does that life look like where you woke up and you were just heaven on earth? And then you paint the picture for me. And I go, okay, if I helped you make that real, would that be a miracle? Yeah, that's what I do. And so, like, that to me is where it all comes together. And so I've done what I can over the last 20 years to truly be everything I can be for the people I have the privilege of serving. And so that journey, it brought me through coaching. It brought me through medical school, becoming a physician. It brought me through energy work and energy healing and bringing that into the fold. And it brought me into the world of psychology, neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, mental and emotional release work. So no matter what somebody was going through, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, I had something I could bring into the conversation that could support them. And it's just been a beautiful roller coaster. And I'll finish off with one of my favorite quotes, is that the master has mastered the art of being a student forever. And so for me, this is a never-ending journey. There's always more that we don't know than what we do know. And so I'm a forever student, and I have the privilege of getting to serve people. And there's a Ram Dass quote. He's a spiritual teacher, and he had said something like, each of us, we're all just walking each other home. And like, that's kind of the vibe. It's like, when I think about my job, what I do is I spend time with people and I help them wake up to what's real. I help them wake up to who they really are. And as they come home to themselves, there's that rising tide that lifts all boats. And I think of it as, each of us in our own life, we're the tide. We're not the boat. And each of the boats is a different area of our life. And you might say, I really want to improve this area of my life. But in this metaphor, improving it means I want the boat to go up. But you don't make the boat go up by working on the boat. You make the boat go up by working on the tide. And when the tide goes up, all the boats rise. And so you mentioned, a lot of people I work with are in the real estate space, but I have many clients who are not. And from that space, when somebody is going to say to me, let me take a backtrack for a second. Yes, there we go. So when someone says to me, how is it that you just helped me with this challenge, with this, whatever I was dealing with, when you don't really know that industry that well? And I'll say, because I'm not a consultant, you didn't bring me on because I know more about that industry than you do. I'm coming from a coaching space where I help you see what you're not seeing. I don't have to understand your industry. If I do, added bonus, but I have to understand you. How are you getting in your own way? How are you not showing up at your best? And if I can help you see that, you typically become way more resourceful than you were before. And you typically come up with the answers. And I've seen that over and over and over again. People in the real estate space tell me, I don't get it. I've been dealing with this problem for months and you helped me solve it in 45 minutes. And you don't understand the industry at all. And I go, yeah, I know. Isn't that cool? And it just is what it is. And so I'll pause there because I can keep talking about this stuff forever.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump into that. So I'll ask this question this way, talking about getting people to realize stuff and unblocking them, all that. What is the energy work you are into that helps with that? What does that entail? How do you attack that? Just a description, I guess, and then we can get into more details later.
Yeah. And so I would put it like this. So I think that there's a lot of foundational understanding that some people may or may not have, depending on their life journey so far and their exposure, that I would need to kind of qualify what I mean by certain terms. But think about it like this, whether it's a spiritual perspective or whether it's a scientific perspective, like a quantum physics perspective, everything is energy. When you look at the world that you live in, there's a quote by, hold on, what is his name? He's a Nobel, it'll come to me in a little bit, but he's a Nobel Prize winning scientist. It was Niels Bohr, there we go, physicist. And he had a beautiful quote. He says, the problem is everything that we call real is made of things that cannot be called real. Because it's coming from a space that from our human perspective, you've got, let's say, solids. You got rocks and trees and houses and cars and the table in front of you. You've got things that feel hard. You've got stuff, matter. But when you come in from a quantum physics perspective, which is, people call it the new science, but it's been around since like the 1920s. But when you like really dive into it, you understand that there really is no such thing as anything that's solid. There's things that appear to be solid, but in reality, it's all almost entirely empty space. It's all just energy vibrating at different frequencies and forms. And when you realize it's all energy, that's the first thing to be with now. So when I think of energy work and the work I do with people, I use a phrase, baggage. Baggage is typically, let's say, emotional and mental. And so you might have limiting beliefs in your capabilities and your worthiness and lovability and all these things. You might have limiting decisions. Something happened to you in the past and you made a decision, consciously or not. Ever since this happened, I can't do that. Ever since this happened, I don't allow myself to, whatever it is. That would be a limiting decision or a limiting belief, like I said before. Another limiting belief, very common, like I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. And very often that's driving us, we're not even aware of it. It's like, where'd that come from? Typically, childhood. Then there's emotional baggage. Now, emotions aren't good or bad. They're meant to be felt because they're there to be felt. Now, when you think of an emotion, let's say you have something like sadness. If somebody, let's say, I don't wish this on anybody, someone you care about passes away, it's normal for you to grieve. It's normal for you to express emotion, tears, whatever it might be. But let's say 20 years from now, you're just as like broken up about it as you were the day it happened. There's no judgment I have about that, but that would be classified as baggage because it's no longer an emotion of the moment. It's an emotion based on something that was suppressed that never fully came out. And so when you think about baggage, there's the primary 5, what we call negative emotions: anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. And this is kind of umbrella emotions in the sense that any emotion that you would consider, or a state or a quality that you would consider maybe undesirable, would likely fall under those 5. And so when you say, I've got an emotion of the moment, completely fine. But if something happened to you 6 months ago, and I bring it up now and you get angry, like furious, but it hasn't happened in 6 months, that's baggage. That's not anger that's helping you. That's not anger that's appropriate in the moment. That's anger based on something that you didn't deal with. It's an unexperienced experience, right? Another way of putting it. And so that being said, all baggage, whether it be an emotion, a belief, whatever it is just stuck energy. And I can use energy to, in a way, blast away energy, stuck energy. And to give you mind if I jump into a story that might help with this?
Yeah, actually, I was going to follow up with, could you give like a sample, I guess, not without mentioning names, I guess, obviously.
They
don't
for
want
sure.
to be.
And so to give a latch-in point for people, when I think about energy work, you might have heard this as energy healing. You might have heard this as like hands-on healing. You might have heard this, depending on where you live in the world and your exposures, pranic healing, Reiki, healing touch. Essentially, it's people using energy work to create physical healing, but it could be emotional healing, mental healing, etc. But physical healing in general in people. And when I was growing up, I didn't, have any touch points for this. I didn't believe in this. And I thought it was all like BS. And then as I got older, I started to get exposed to it. I had some friends who were trained in certain things, and they said, "You want to have a session? I'll practice with you." I was like, "Sure." Excuse me. And I just remember, laying there, let's say, getting a healing session, and part of me thinking, "The hell am I doing? Like this stuff doesn't work." And then noticing after, I felt something there. That was interesting. Like, I don't know what that was, but there was something there. And, I feel really good in my body right now. Maybe I didn't feel that good before, or maybe I had some pain and now it's gone. That's interesting. And, over the years, I started to be more and more open to it. Remember, after I graduated med school, I was working at this medical clinic, and the guy who owned the clinic, he was, amongst many things, he was a businessman, but he was also a Reiki master. Reiki is a form of energy healing originating in Japan. Now, all energy healing is kind of the same. It's just different labels and different descriptions and different, it could be symbolized differently, chanted differently, different words and all these things, but it's all pulling from the same, source. And so when we come from that space, this is like a Japanese form of energy healing, and he had used it to cure himself of cancer. And, he's a beautiful soul. And I remember speaking with him, and I get the job, and he shakes my hand. And when he shakes my hand, he looks at me and he just said, "You would be very good at Reiki." In the moment, I had no idea, how to take that. It's like when someone gives you a compliment, but it doesn't really make sense to you. So it's like, thanks. And so now I know he had felt something like in my hand, in my presence, but in the moment I had no context. So I didn't know. And I just remember thinking, thank you. And at the time I had already been doing coaching for years. I had just finished my medical school training and had my license. And I was beginning my work in that respect. And then, continue that process. And I started to work with some people, but I didn't call it energy healing because, again, I didn't have any context for that. But there were times where somebody was really stressed out and they were, let's say, a friend of mine, and they were going through a hard situation. And so I'll give a specific example. There was this woman and she had this massive like headache, neck pain. And I said, I've worked with a lot of massage therapists and they've taught me a few things. Would you like me to help if I can? Let's 20, 30 minutes, see what happens. Sure. She lays down. I start massaging the neck area. But then at one point, I noticed she kind of starts to be really relaxed. I was basically done. So I didn't want to wake her up. So instead of just like standing there, I just intuitively felt something of like, maybe I should do this. And I just put my hands on her head. I thought about this memory that I had, and it was a memory with my father after he had his brain aneurysm. He was in the hospital, and I think I brought up the story in a previous conversation with you, and some people can check that one out if they want to learn more about it. But we were in the hospital, and it was a really trying, time for us as a family. But this moment happened that we've been waiting for so long, and it was such a happy moment, and it was up until that point one of the happiest moments of my life. And there I was in this room with this woman, and my hands were on her head, and I started thinking about this memory. And as I allow myself to fully think about this memory, I just felt my whole body with like tingles and like this flooding of joy and gratitude and positive emotion and love. And then I started imagining directing that energy, that emotion into this woman's head. And as I was doing it, I felt all this something coming down my arms. Again, this is before I was trained in any of this stuff, so I didn't have any context. It was just doing it intuitively. And I felt all this, now I would call it energy, coming down my arms into her head.
Mhm.
And then about 20 minutes go by,
Mhm.
and I felt like complete, and I let go and I just wait.
Mhm.
And then she opens her eyes a few minutes later and she looks at me,
Mhm.
and she looks completely different. She had a lot of
Mhm.
pain in that face area, a lot of tension, heaviness.
Mhm.
And it was gone. There was this look of like the weight of the world was off of her face.
Mhm.
And then she had actually worked with energy healers before, and she looked at me and she goes, "That was incredible. Like that was the best energy session I've ever had."
Mhm.
And obviously I didn't call it an energy session because I didn't have any context. And so I just said, "Cool. Like tell me, what happened."
Mhm.
And she tells me like her grandfather had passed away at, not too in the not too recent past.
Mhm.
And she literally tells me she goes, "I had an out of body experience where I spoke with my grandfather and he told me all these things that I've been needing to hear. And I was
Mhm.
finally able to let go
Mhm.
of all this, maybe guilt I was holding on to, things of that nature." And she was so grateful and she had tears in her eyes. Now, again, I had no idea. This is like when the guy shook my hand and he gave me the compliment. Thanks,
Mhm.
wow, like that's awesome. You had that experience. I have no idea what I did, but that's cool.
Mhm.
And so that was like the beginning for me of like something happened there. Now, using what I know now, she
Mhm.
had a massive release of mental and emotional baggage. And
Mhm.
the energy was able to clear that out of her system. And then physically her headache went away and it helped the muscles, relax. And she felt a lot better.
Mhm.
So then a couple of years went by and I ended up getting the intuition came back in and it said, "You need to go get trained in Reiki."
Mhm.
And I live in New York,
Mhm.
and I spoke with that gentleman that I used to work for,
Mhm.
and he ended up pointing me to a woman in Arizona who he recommended I work with. I flew
Mhm.
over there for several trainings, and I went through the ranks. And there's three levels of Reiki. The top level is called the Reiki Master, and I went through those ranks, and I got to that top level.
Mhm.
And I just remember, she does these. They call them attunements, where she's
Mhm.
attuning my system, my body to the energy. And now I'm able to, according to like the Reiki, let's say, philosophy,
Mhm.
direct this energy to help people.
Mhm.
Get back home, can't feel anything.
Mhm.
I'm just assuming that it worked.
Mhm.
And the timing had just worked out where my uncle had passed away, very
Mhm.
close to us.
Mhm.
And my grandmother was living with us for about a month after that. My uncle was handicapped and he was in his 60s. And ever since he was a kid, my grandma was taking care of him.
Mhm.
And so now she was like on her own.
Mhm.
She had back pain her whole life and she had this immense grieving process that was beginning.
Mhm.
I just said, you know what? Let's do like some energy work. And so we do that. By
Mhm.
the second day, your back pain went away
Mhm.
and it didn't come back.
Mhm.
And then we did that every day for about 5, 6 days.
Mhm.
And her grieving was notably different after that fourth to fifth day onward. There was a level of acceptance and calmness that wasn't there before that may or may not have been there, because no one knows what would have happened if I didn't do that. Right. So it's like, may or may not have been there, but it was palpable enough that I was like, okay, something happened there.
Mhm.
But the medical side of me, the science-minded side of me, before I knew all
Mhm.
the quantum physics stuff and dove into the science of the energy work, that was more recent. So I didn't know it at the time.
Mhm.
And that part of me was very skeptical. And that part of me would say things like, how do I know it was this? How do
Mhm.
I know it wasn't a placebo or a coincidence or something else that was happening?
Mhm.
And then I remember I get an uncle of mine who I've only met, a couple times, and he lives in California. And he gives me a call and he goes, "Hey, can you help my brother?"
Mhm.
And I'd never met his brother. I heard about him, never met him. And I was
Mhm.
like, I'll have a conversation with him. And this guy, long story short, had worked with as many doctors as you can possibly think of.
Mhm.
No one's been able to help him. And he's in a really grave, dire situation. And I tell him, look, he's a very, religious man, very Christian. And I said to him, I medically, I'm across the country.
Mhm.
I can't do a physical exam. I can't really see what's going on. You could tell me things, but I don't know fully what's going on, your full picture.
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable, treating in that sense.
Mhm.
But I told them I just got back from this training, and I believe people are brought together for a reason. Things happen for a reason.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's going to work, and I can't promise anything, so I'm
Mhm.
not going to charge you for it. But I'd love to give you a session of this. I said, worst case scenario, nothing happens, and best case scenario, there's a miracle.
Mhm.
And I said, are you open to that?
Mhm.
And he's like, I'll do anything. And so I find out that he has all these neurological symptoms. He goes to gets a brain scan, and he has multiple brain aneurysms and strokes that are so severe and significant that the doctors are saying, not only can we not do anything to help you, but they told him to get his affairs in order because they predicted he'd have a massive stroke within the next 6 weeks or so. And I just remember imagining getting a prognosis like that, how horrible that would be. And he felt almost like hopeless. Nothing could be done. And so we meet up for our session, and it's over Zoom. And this is the thing that was cool, because energy work, when I first started doing it, it was in person. So it was hands-on, and I love doing it hands-on. But as you learn the science of how, the quantum physics of it, everything is energy. A Buddhist might say it's all one consciousness expressing itself in an infinite number of ways. Quantum physics says that same thing. In Hinduism, they say the same thing. There's an idea, they call it the million masks of God in Hinduism, where it's like everyone is basically God wearing a mask. It's God pretending to be all the different forms. And so, in the Kabbalah, ancient Judaism, or mystic Judaism rather, there's a perspective in there, God is everything, but everything is not God. In mystic Christianity, kind of the esoteric teachings of Christ, same idea. The least among you can do all that I have done and more. The Father and I are one. Did I not say that ye are gods too? Like all these different things Jesus saying to his disciples when they woke him up in the boat to calm the storm, like, why are you waking me up? Why didn't you do it? Like, you could do it. Why do you think it's just me? Like, ye of little faith, that whole kind of thing. And so, let me just see. I got excited there. I'll get my mind back. Okay, so I started to, so it's all the energy is connected. And so because it's all connected, distance and time aren't a factor. And so think about it like this. Everyone listening, have you ever had the experience where you thought about somebody, whether you spoke to them recently or not, you thought about somebody? It's even more powerful as a realization if you haven't thought about them in a while. And within a couple minutes, a couple hours, a day or two, they reached out to you. Hey, I was just thinking about you. And you're like, that's so weird. I was just thinking about you. Or you get a phone call or a text and your phone buzzes or rings. And before you even look at it, you go, it's Mary. Right. And then you look and it's Mary. And you say, oh, it's just a coincidence. But almost everybody's had that experience. And there's a bunch of other versions of that as well. If you haven't had, for those two specific examples, there's a bunch of other ones that you would have had one of those. Now, when you sit there and you go, how is it that that's a thing? To keep it really simple, think of it like this. You've got your computer connected to a Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi connects it to universal internet, or, global internet at least. And with the global internet, you can then, Raju and I don't live in the same state, and we can connect right now. Why? Because we're on the same frequency. Like my Zoom and his Zoom are on the same frequency, and you listening to this, if you're on LinkedIn or wherever you're listening to this, because you're on the same channel, you're able to tune in. But it's the same thing that when I think about you, you and I are on the same channel. And so by me thinking about you, depending on how sensitive you are, depending on how present you are, you may feel me. You may, and you might not consciously go, Jamil's thinking about me. No, but you might randomly think about me. It's not actually random, it just appears to be random. Because in a way, my computer and your computer are using the consciousness, which is like universal Wi-Fi, to connect. And so using that from that perspective, he's in California, I'm in New York, and we had a 45-minute Zoom session. And I see him laying in his bed. And when I do energy work over a distance, I do it in my mind. And so I'm in my mind and I'm imagining being in the room with him, and I start working on him. And not only his head, he had other issues in his back and all over. And as I start working on his back, pulling the pain out on the video, I see him start arching his back. And then he says out loud, are you touching my back right now? Like, I feel that. And I was just smiling like, yeah. And I was just like, again, I was still figuring things out and trusting the process because I couldn't feel it myself yet. Some people can feel energy, some people can see it, some people do all of it. Think if you have your 5 physical senses, you have like a heightened version of all of those that are more energetic. And at least under my conscious awareness at the time, I didn't have any of those. And so I was just trusting that this was working, but he could feel me. And I was like, wow. And then we finish. And then I did distance healing for him every night, which basically is a form of prayer, essentially, where without him just having his permission, spending 5-10 minutes every night directing that healing energy to him and specifically to his brain. About 8-9 days go by. I'm out on a walk, and it was almost like, I grew up Christian. I consider myself more spiritual now after exploring all the religions and finding love and peace in all of them. But with that in mind, like more of a Christian kind of framework, if you want to say, I was saying, a conversation with God. I'm out on a walk and I'm like, God, I really want to believe this energy work is real. And I still have so much skepticism because the science part of me is not like letting up. You got to give me something so tangible that I can't deny it. And within a day or two, it was either 24 or 48 hours later, I get this video text message from this guy in the hospital. He's laughing and crying at the same time. And he's telling me, just did a brain scan. My brain's completely normal. There's no sign of anything. And the doctors are telling me it was a miracle. We have no idea what happened. And he was thanking me so much. He's literally sent me a message practically every day for 2 to 3 years now. Like a good morning, beautiful kind of message. And he was just so grateful. And that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, I went all into it. And I continued my coaching work with the mental, emotional, and the physical, the relationships, the business. That was always happening. But the energy side, it opened me up now. And I said, okay, I want to bring this into this work however I can. Because yeah, it works physically, but it also can work, mentally and emotionally. Maybe I can help people with that as well. And then I just remember continuing with my Reiki practice. I went on to get additional energy healing and Hawaiian energy healing. And that was a really powerful experience for me because something about that resonated with my spirit so much that right when I got back from that training, my ability to feel energy physically turned on, where I could put my hand out, both my hands could be like, 3, 4, 5 feet apart, and I could trace something with one of my hands into the palm of the other and feel it as if I was touching it. Direct the energy to somebody else and they would feel it most of the time if they were sensitive enough. I could put my hand out and feel where your problem was. And just have that knowing that there it is. And then I could direct energy to it and it would clear. And now it's not there anymore in your field and you'd feel better. And I would say, this is amazing. And I would continue to study it. How does this actually work? And I would continue to work with people and people would have pain, let's say, physically, emotionally. And we'd have one session, sometimes a couple sessions, and it was gone. And then I began to be able to see energy and literally like science fiction kind of stuff. Like you imagine looking at somebody and they hold their hand out and you see a giant ball of green energy around their hand. Like you're watching a Harry Potter movie or something. That stuff's real. And I'm seeing that, and I know people that can see it as well, and they've corroborated, yeah, like I see that too. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And it opened me up, and I hope people can hear, regardless of the energy or whether it's something else, one lesson to take in. I said earlier, you don't see life the way that it is, you see it the way you are, because you find what you're looking for. So if you're very closed off and closed-minded, intentionally or not, you will only see what you're looking for. So you see what you believe you'll see. So if you don't believe something is possible, you're less likely to experience it. Because it's like almost like a radio metaphor or a TV station metaphor. What station do you watch or listen to? The one you're tuned into. So if you're not tuned into it, you don't experience it. Well, what makes you tune into it? Because you believe there's something there to tune into. You believe there's something to watch or to listen to. You don't turn on channel 47 or something without knowing that there's stuff on channel 47. It's kind of like implied belief, And so as I opened myself up more, it was almost like more came in. I was starting to see more and more. It's almost like the horse metaphor of the blinders when it's on the track and it's racing. It only sees what's in front of it. But there's a whole world in its peripheral that it is not aware of. And slowly but surely, the blinders started to come off. And I could see more and more than I saw before. And the whole thing is, belief isn't required in the sense that someone can tell me, I don't really believe in this stuff. Can you help me? As long as you give me permission to, yeah. Ready to let it go. And then if they say, yeah, I had a guy, he had multiple bones fractured in his foot. Really believe in this stuff. He was a physician himself. And I explained how it worked to the best of my ability. and use as much, scientific language as I could to meet him where he's at. And it was enough for him to go, you know what? I'm open. I don't believe in it because I've never seen it. And I'm open. Let's see if it happens.
Mhm.
He had a fractured foot, multiple bones, and he could barely walk. He was limping. This was hands-on. He gets on the table, work on his whole body, but I specifically focused on his foot.
Mhm.
And when I do energy work, hands-on or not, my hands get really hot. It's almost like there's an infrared sauna coming out of my hands, and people feel that heat like penetrating into their body.
Mhm.
And my understanding, that's one way energy can be experienced.
Mhm.
And within about 45 minutes to an hour, he gets off the table. All of the pain in his foot was gone. He didn't end up needing to get surgery.
Mhm.
And he walked out of there with no limp.
Mhm.
And he looked at me and he goes, I gave him water after. And he jokingly said, did you put something in this water? He's like, I feel high right now. And I laughed and I was like, no, that's very common. And he had all this guilt from past experiences that was gone.
Mhm.
And he just felt so present. I had another woman who she had an abusive relationship. And after we did the energy work, she never stood up for herself. And the day after, she started standing up for herself, enforcing her boundaries, and just felt this newfound courage that just wasn't there before.
Mhm.
And so now when I think about the energy work, think of it like in my training, we all have 4 bodies. And there's, and this is specifically the Hawaiian training, but most of the world's, religions, philosophies, cultures have a form of this.
Mhm.
So the 4 bodies from a Hawaiian perspective, we have a physical body, an emotional body, a mental body, and a spiritual body.
Mhm.
So you're one being with 4 bodies, but it's like a trickle down effect: spirit, mental, emotional, physical.
Mhm.
Any issues that you're having in the spiritual / the energetic
Mhm.
trickle down to the mental, to the
Mhm.
emotional, and then manifest in the physical as a health concern. If you have an emotional trauma, somebody passes away, something happens, you
Mhm.
were abused, something big happened for you, and you
Mhm.
didn't know how to handle it. And so your system suppressed it to protect you.
Mhm.
But that suppression trickles down. And let's say an autoimmune disease shows up, or a cancer shows up, or something shows up. You have a mental baggage, a belief, a decision that you made about why you're not good enough, why you're not worthy, why whatever. That
Mhm.
trickles down into the emotional and then into the physical. And I
Mhm.
said earlier, all baggage is just stuck energy. And
Mhm.
so when you use the energy in the spiritual realm, or / the energetic realm, or / the quantum realm, whatever label resonates with you is fine.
Mhm.
That trickle down effect impacts the physical body.
Mhm.
And prior to doing the energy work, I did mental and emotional release work. I still do that as well. And there was a woman I remember who had rheumatoid arthritis. It's a, autoimmune inflammatory condition. And she
Mhm.
had it for decades, like 30, 40 years. And she's in her 60s. And I find out that it started when she was 20. And
Mhm.
she opens up and she tells me about it. And it turns out, when she was a baby, she was abused by her father, physically, sexually, emotionally, everything, up
Mhm.
until she was 20.
Mhm.
And then she moved. And everything that her father kind of instilled in her,
Mhm.
that it was her fault, she deserved it, she had it coming, all that really messed up stuff,
Mhm.
that was implanted into her subconscious mind.
Mhm.
And at that point, she moves away. And in her, let's say, model of the world that her father heavily created and influenced,
Mhm.
who's going to give her what she deserves if dad's not around?
Mhm.
She did. So she starts having an autoimmune condition and attacking herself. And then I took her through a process to forgive her father, not for what he did,
Mhm.
but to let go of this poison
Mhm.
emotionally, mentally from the past that's no longer serving you now.
Mhm.
And when she finally let that go and was at peace, her rheumatoid arthritis went away. I've had people have had chronic nerve pain for decades after injury, and then it heals after doing something that seemingly had nothing to do with the injury. It had to do with a mental and emotional trauma from when they were a child. And when they release that, they heal. And at the end of the day, to bring it all full circle now, no matter what you've got going on, anything you feel as a symptom, mentally, emotionally, or physically, it's just pointing to something deeper. It's pointing to whatever the real issue is. If you have a headache, that isn't the problem. That's a symptom of the problem. If you've got skin rashes everywhere, that's not the problem. That's a symptom of a greater problem, and it's manifesting in the skin. as
Mhm.
like a warning sign. It's the car check engine light going off saying something's wrong here.
Mhm.
If you're not happy and you're frustrated and you're angry all the time, that's a symptom.
Mhm.
But we live in a world, specifically in the Western world, but it's kind of infiltrated all over, that we've got this pill for every ill, quick fix mindset
Mhm.
where we treat symptoms. We don't get to the root cause. And so when you use the four body metaphor, and now it's like, okay, if my problem is originating in the physical body, I broke my leg, it will require a physical solution. The bone needs to be mended, set, all these kind of things. Okay. But if the problem originated in the mental and the emotional, it won't go away if you just treat it physically. And very often, I've seen this over and over again with chronic disease, autoimmune, cancer, things of that nature. If you only address the physical, it often comes back.
Yeah.
But if you address the mental and the emotional and the spiritual disharmony in the system, that healing can potentially be permanent. And there's no guarantee. Nobody can promise that, depending on whoever's listening, your belief system, whether you call it luck and chance, or whether you call it God, universe, source has a plan. I don't know what that plan is for you. And so maybe this is the time when your life is supposed to end. If that's the case, no amount of healing from me is going to do anything to stop that. But I can, in that situation, help you feel more comfortable. I can help that transition ease easier. But
Mhm.
there are times where my own personal belief, we're brought together for a reason, and we're brought together because I meant to help you. And
Mhm.
so from that space, I come with that in mind, and people get better. And the final point here is it's not me doing it, which may or may not sound weird to people who are listening to this, depending on their background. My job is to be the channel, is to be the conduit, it's to be the vessel. I do the work on myself every single day to make sure clear so that that energy can come in, whether it's just life energy, God energy, universal energy, whatever you want to call it, it comes in through me. Because think about it like this. How is it that I can facilitate somebody's cancer healing or brain healing? I don't know how to do that, but it happened.
Mhm.
So it's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going, yeah, the problem is because this tumor is infringing on this blood supply and this nerve is doing this thing and that bone is in the wrong. No, I just go to where the problem feels like it is and I let the energy through.
Mhm.
And then I have certain things that I do as a practice to allow that process to be as strong as it can be.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's just a gift that I've been able to cultivate over the years that excites me very much so. And I so appreciate the opportunity to speak about it with you and your listeners. And I hope that people can hear that whether it's somebody like me or something completely different, know that there are other opinions for whatever it is you've got going on, symptomology wise. Someone gives you a diagnosis. I remember hearing Deepak Chopra say, believe the diagnosis, but don't believe the prognosis. The diagnosis is true. Okay, this is what's going on right now. You've
Mhm.
got this condition. Okay. But the prognosis is like, and this is what it means. This is what the future is going to be for you. But
Mhm.
nobody knows that. The prognosis at best is an educated guess
Mhm.
based on statistics and based on your own personal experience and based on what you've heard from your textbooks and your mentors. Based on what they've seen, this is probably what's going to happen. Now, depending on how often it's seen, maybe it's likely to happen, but any doctor who's been in practice long enough and they're working with enough patients, they see cases of spontaneous remission. They see, here's a patient that was told they were going to die in 6 months of their cancer, and it's been 20 years and they're still alive,
Mhm.
and they don't have cancer anymore. And you go, how did that happen? And so the fact that it does happen, not to everybody, but it does happen, tells you that it's possible. Now, if it's possible, why not possible for you?
Mhm.
And I said earlier, you find what you're looking for. If you don't believe it, it's unlikely that you'll see it. It's
Mhm.
possible, but it's unlikely or less likely. And so, step one is you buying into the fact that it's possible that no matter what's going on, my body is intelligent. If I get cut on my skin, I don't have to do anything to heal that. My body heals itself.
Mhm.
So, what happens where it's not doing that for whatever my chronic disease is? There's a lot of reasons for that. that aren't really appropriate for me to get into now,
Mhm.
medically and otherwise. But there's a block. There's something going on that's stopping the body from doing the healing that it could potentially be doing.
Mhm.
And when you can realize what that is and you can get the blocks out of the way, the system has a beautiful way of repairing itself. And so I just implore everyone listening to expand those blinders, just like on the horse, off of your own eyes, and don't see it as there's only one way, or this is the only way to heal. There's somebody in the world, no matter what condition you have, that
Mhm.
has recovered from it. And even if your healthcare professional is saying that it's not possible, keep in mind, hopefully they mean well, and
Mhm.
hopefully they are giving you the best information that they have available at the time. So they're not lying to you. They're telling you what they believe is true.
Mhm.
But what they believe is true is based on their training and education. And if their training and education didn't include this stuff, they don't know about it. And so, of course, just like I didn't know about it.
Mhm.
And so, of course, they're going to be skeptical about certain things. And of course, they're not going to believe certain things. But as I've been, like I said, a perpetual student. So as I've allowed myself to open up more and more to what are all of these doctors, nurses, shamans, healers around the world doing, because they're getting results. At the end of the day, science is like there's an expression that was used kind of heavily over the last couple of years, which I think is very ironic, which is the science is settled.
Mhm.
The thing is that like science by definition is never settled. Everything's like a theory. Everything is this is the best evidence we have right now, and we believe this is how it works until we get a better theory, and then we'll drop the old one and use the new one.
Right.
You know, the earth was flat until we realized otherwise. But you were like called crazy if you didn't think it was flat.
Mhm.
The earth was the center of the solar system, if not the universe, and you were crazy. You were killed if you didn't believe that. You know, and now it's seen otherwise. There's medical practices that were done 200 years ago by medical doctors that if you did that now, you'd lose your license.
Mhm.
But that was normal back then. That's what people believed. And so just because we believe it now doesn't mean we're going to believe it 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. Just because it's considered fringe medicine now, like on the fringe, things that are considered mainstream now were considered fringe 20 years ago. And the people who practiced 20 years ago and still practice now are like, told you. And it's like, you know, because they were getting results. And so it's just like whether it's in business or relationships or health or anything. Look at people who are getting the results that you want. And if they're getting the results you want, what are they doing? And who are they being? And what are they believing? And what are their motivations? And what's their thought process? Because then you know the recipe and you can create as close to a similar result as possible. If I have a medical condition, I want to go to somebody who's helped somebody heal from that, not somebody who's never seen it heal.
Mhm.
Now, most of the time, we don't know any better because, like I said, I didn't have the point of references either. So you do the best you can. You go to the doctor that you think is the expert. But you know, people say in medicine, don't be afraid to get a second opinion, or a third opinion, or a fourth opinion. And I keep saying this, but like final point, I remember hearing a Tony Robbins story because it's a great way to close it. He talked about how when he was a younger, I think he was in his 20s,
Mhm.
the reason why he's so big, he's like 6'7", 6'6", he's
Right.
a big, he has a tumor on his pituitary gland.
Right.
And I believe he has like gigantism. He has a lot of growth hormone flowing through, all this stuff. And when he was younger, he gets this like medical, this is the story I remember. He gets this medical examination. He's out cross country doing some big training, and he gets a call from his doctor. Hey, you got to call me immediately. It's an emergency.
Mhm.
Tony talks to him finally, and the guy goes, you've got this tumor. It's on your brain. We have to operate like tomorrow.
Mhm.
And Tony's going, what, like, really? Like, what's how long have I had it for? It looks like it's been there for a long time.
Mhm.
What's the possible like negative like consequence of doing this surgery?
Mhm.
And he's like, well, you're probably going to not be able to do your seminars anymore, and you won't be able to have all the energy you have right now, and you'll probably be pretty tired.
Mhm.
And to tell someone like Tony Robbins he's going to feel tired, it's like, you don't do that. So he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I can't do that. And so essentially, he gets the second opinion. And the second opinion tells him the same thing as the first guy. You got to do this surgery. Then he gets a third opinion, and then a fourth opinion. And at one point, he's talking to a doctor, like a fourth or fifth opinion, and the guy goes, Tony goes, I've had this tumor now for like at least 5 or 10 years.
Mhm.
I'm still alive.
Mhm.
What's the harm in not doing the surgery at all and just like monitoring it?
Mhm.
And the doctor goes, well, it looks like the tumor in a way has shrunk a little bit.
Mhm.
And there's a blood test that we can do like every year that can like monitor things. And if we just keep monitoring it every year, you should be able to just keep doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
That was like 30 or 40 years ago. So imagine the impact someone like Tony Robbins has had on billions of people potentially, if not hundreds of millions.
Mhm.
And imagine if you listen to the perspective of the first doctor.
Mhm.
Now, the thing is, that first doctor, I'd imagine, meant well. He's
Mhm.
trying to save Tony's life. I think he was a friend of Tony's, but he only knows what he knows, or she only knows. In this case, it was a guy, but he or she only knows what they know.
Mhm.
So it's no disrespect to the healthcare practitioner, but it is saying it is your life, and you got to have all the information. You want to make an educated, informed consent decision. What happens if I do this? What happens if I don't do it? What are the other options? Has anyone else recovered from this? How did they do it? And maybe your person doesn't know. And then you might want to get multiple opinions.
Yep.
And very often, like Tony, you may save your life in the process as a result of doing that. And so I'll pause there. Thank you for your listening. That was amazing.
All right, awesome. Yeah, no, I was going to ask several questions, but he kind of answered everything. So I'm not going to ask those because actually sake of time too. We're almost an hour. I didn't even realize, but we're almost an hour. So, a couple of points I wanted to make was, the last point you made. That's an excellent point in the sense about doctors, right? In my own life recently, I got ulcers last year. Long story short, a little bit complication because I'm pretty hard-headed. Like I didn't want to use medications, all that stuff. But anyway, one of the doctors said, "Oh, you got to get bypass and put holes in all that stuff." And that's what the doctor said. No, that's the only option. Second doctor does the same thing. I didn't do anything, right? 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, talked to another doctor when I felt like everything was healed. He said, you don't need anything. Just abandon the medicine. You're good. Guess what? It's been almost a year. I'm good. So yeah, what Dr. Jamil says is a great point. First of all, there are two things I want to point out. One is if you don't believe in this, the energy or feelings, whatever affecting your body, read the book, Body Keeps the Score. There's a great book that everybody can read. You can see clearly how the doctor does enough research for you to show you the effects of your negative feelings, energy, whatever affecting your body. And there's plenty others. Dr. Joe Dispenza, who heals, like Dr. Jamil said, heals people over long distances.
Yeah.
It's proven over and over again.
Just one, in addition to the books you mentioned, another book, Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and it's coming from this space. It's no longer, and I say this with respect, with immense respect for our audience, because everyone's listening at different levels of education, expertise. There's people here who are very qualified who are listening. And with respect, I tell you, if you think what I'm talking about is a belief, you don't know the science. It's been around for like 40 years at least, like enough science to back up. There's double-blind, placebo, all these controlled studies to show. Another great book called The Energy Cure, written by a PhD scientist in New York who calls himself a failed skeptic because he tried to disprove energy work for decades. And he ends up having this massive experiment on mice where he's consistently curing them of their tumors that he's injecting them with. And they have their genetically susceptible mice, or the kind of mice that all these people around the world use in experiments. It's a mammary tumor. You inject it, they all get the cancer, and they all die within like 28 days or something like that, less than a month. And the average lifespan of a normal, healthy mouse, I think it's, or rat, I think it's a mouse. Yeah, it's like 2 years or something like that. And so they're all dying in less than a month because of this tumor. And he's doing energy work on all these mice, and they're all living the full 2 years, and their tumors are going away. And then he's replicating it. And he has all these scientists when he presents that while they're in the audience, they're looking at him with these looks of the hell's this? Like, why are you doing this? But then after they go, any questions? Nobody raises their hand. As if like, I'm not even going to like believe this stuff. And then he gets approached in private by the same people in the room, whispering, hey, don't tell anyone I'm approaching you. That was phenomenal. Like, can I work with you? I would love to learn more about this, but I can't let people know that I'm interested in this
Right.
because there goes my reputation. We live in a world that's gotten so closed off scientifically to stuff like this that science is like that broad spectrum, and you got the blinders on and you're saying this is the only science I'm going to pay attention to, when there's all this other science just as valid that you're not seeing. So it's not that you're wrong, you're incomplete.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to see a complete picture, those books that Raju and I mentioned and that I mentioned can go a long way to pointing you in that direction. But this is the new frontier, even though it's been around for thousands of years. This is the new frontier of health. This is that ultimate form of healing, because it's as high as you can get using those 4 body metaphors I gave you, that trickle down effect. And it actually sees people in a holistic light. You're not just a body, you have a body.
Right.
You've got emotions, you've got a mind, and depending on how people choose to believe, you've got a spirit, that animating force. And when you think about a disharmony or a disturbance in any of those areas, of course they're going to manifest. But you heal it and things turn around quickly. And so those books go a long way. Check those out.
Awesome. All right. With that, I'll end it. My battery was running out too. I was trying to plug in the PowerPoint power, but kind of ending it here. But I will share, Dr. Jamil's info again, so reach out to him if what he said sounded something that you would like to look into. I would recommend looking into, really, whether you do it with him or not, just look into it, really. I mean, it is true. I can get in, sake of time, I can get into my own examples of those stuff, but I will end it here. Again, Dr. Jamil, thanks for taking the time. We had a great time, and hopefully a lot of people, at least even one person, opened their eyes. That would be awesome. So
Absolutely.
thanks again.
All my love to you, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.